Bill Parker, the author of Guaranteeing America's Security in the 21st Century, and the East West Institute's COO, joins me now. Bill, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Great to be back on your show, David.
So, let's take your first thoughts on what just happened in Washington, D.C. Your view.
Well, my view, I think I would start with Mike Pompeo. I mean, here's a guy who has served as a congressman, served as the director of Central Intelligence Agency, West Point grad, Harvard Law School grad. He has the bona fides and he has the experience. So I think a very good choice to be the next Secretary of State. Of course, the Secretary serves at the pleasure of the President. That's been made clear. And in this particular case, because it's a cabinet level, will have to be confirmed by the Senate. But I think Mike Pompeo was a fantastic choice for the next Secretary of State.
So now, in the bigger on the global stage, let's go big picture on this. And I wrote about this in The Hill this week, an article that appears in today's newspaper, that we have been predictable as a nation for decades. Regardless of what administration was in the White House, we were fairly predictable on the world stage, especially when it came to the State Department and the diplomatic corps. Do you agree with me, number one, and do you think that the unpredictability can be an asset to us in this time?
I do think unpredictability in some cases is good and in some cases can be dangerous. But what's more important is that this administration is looking at the instruments of national power. And if you look at those seven: diplomatic, information, military, economic, financial, intelligence, and law enforcement. Those are your seven instruments of national power. He is not taking any of them off the table. When you start taking one or two of these off the table, these instruments of national power, you weaken your approach. And so on one side, he's saying, for Korea, for example, the administration is saying, if you don't behave yourself, if the nukes don't go away, I have free carrier strike groups and a whole lot of other weapons and capabilities to put a hurting on you. On the other side, I'm willing to talk to you face to face, but there are certain things that has to happen in order to have that conversation come to fruition. So I think at the end of the day, the fact that he is keeping all of those instruments of national power on the table instead of saying we will never do certain things is very helpful. And as you point out, keeps the potential adversary guessing on what it is you are going to use. On the other side, you have to be direct enough in your communication of this is what you're thinking on a pretty regular basis so that you don't have people responding to what they think is going to happen as opposed to what is actually happening.
Let's bring the president's words into this. This is President Trump talking about this issue. I'm talking with Bill Parker, COO of the East West Institute. Let's play it.
I've worked with Mike Pompeo now for quite some time. Tremendous energy, tremendous intellect. We're always on the same wavelength. The relationship has been very good, and that's what I need as Secretary of State. As far as Rex Tillerson is concerned, I very much appreciate his commitment and his service, and I wish him well. Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he felt it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently. So we were not really thinking the same. With Mike Pompeo, we have a very similar thought process. I think it's going to go very well.
Now, the key words to me there, Bill, wavelength. The president talks about being on the same wavelength. And, I'm not surprised that two very strong-willed, powerful, worldly men on the political and business stage, Donald Trump and Rex Tillerson, would have differences of opinions and disagreements. That doesn't shock me. Matter of fact, that people have their own minds and their own views of things applied even within their position or outside of it, I think is a good thing. But the president talked about being on the same wavelength. And as someone who wants to carry out what he is developing in his foreign policy doctrine, do you see the value of a president saying, I need people who will give me input and opinion, but at some point we have to come to my vision?
Well, absolutely. You need to have those talks behind closed doors of where you agree and where you disagree, and I know that is happening. And then at the end of the day, once the decision is made, then the government needs to proceed forward as one organization. So the conversation happens. You vehemently disagree, but then when the boss makes the decision, then you proceed forward. If you can't live with that decision, then you step down and you say, "I'm sorry, I can't live with that decision." And I'll give you some examples of some of the disagreements. Mr. Tillerson wanted to remain in the Paris Climate Accord. President Trump felt differently. We talked about the Iran nuclear deal was a second one for sure. The response to the recent nerve gas attack in Britain was a big deal. The White House was very careful in how they worded the response to that, because I think they didn't have all the details yet, and they wanted to be careful. And Mr. Tillerson came out just the last couple of days and said it appears that it clearly came from Russia. So these are just some of the examples where there was a disconnect in message. It doesn't mean they have to always agree, but then when the message goes forward, that strategic communication effort has to be aligned between State Department, the White House, and Department of Defense in particular.